Hey, this is Tom Kundert from Portugal.net and you're listening to the Seleção podcast.
Simões bending one for Torres. Eusebio. Oh my word! Have you ever seen anything like that?
Bem jogado por Simão, a passar por dois adversários, Simão a tentar oferecer o golo a Figo e a bola é golo! O golo da Figo!
Rui Costa já acreditou, vai tirar para o golo, atira, golo! 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 Cristiano Ronaldo, vai para Cristiano Ronaldo! Bateu, golo, 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 golo! Chuta! Gol!
And we welcome you to episode number 77 of the Seleção podcast, a proud partner of Portugal.net. My name is Danny Pinto. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode. It's been a few months since the appointment of Roberto Martinez as the new manager of the Seleção, and the last couple of days or so, depending on when you're hearing this podcast, he announced his first call-ups for the upcoming qualifiers for Euro 2024, taking place in the next few days here against Liechtenstein and Luxembourg, respectfully. So we'll take a look at the roster. We'll kind of go over a little bit of the press conference and preview things to come here with our good friend Tom Kundert of Portugal.net. But before we do, let's make sure we get all of our clicks and our plugs in before we bring Tom on. Remember, bookmark the podcast website, selecaopod.com. Follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at selecaopod. Facebook.com/selecaopod, and email the show selecaopod@gmail.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, anywhere, any podcasting platform. If you haven't subscribed to us, please do. Also, obviously, if you're watching this episode, you can find us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Just search the Seleção podcast. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already for this interview and throughout the interview. Just a number of ways that we bring you the podcast each and every time we come on. And speaking of bringing on our next guest, we'll go ahead and do that right now as Tom Kundert joins us from Portugal. Tom, it's not Father's Day here in the States, but it is Father's Day in Portugal. So Feliz Dia de Pais to you and all of our listeners in Portugal.
Thank you very much, Danny. Yeah, same to you as well. Although, yeah, you can, your Portuguese side of you can claim that Dia do Pai. You know.
Believe me. When we're recording this very early in the States. When my wife wakes up this morning and my kids, and I'm gonna be like, "Where's my stuff, guys? Where's my stuff?"
Fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, obviously we are a national team podcast, but I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't ask you if you're still flying high from Thursday's theatrics at the Emirates as Sporting find themselves getting through in the Europa League in the most dramatic of fashions.
Yeah, look at this smile, Danny. Ear to ear. Yeah, it's been like that since Thursday. My feet have hardly touched the ground. Yeah, amazing performance. I was just talking a little bit off air, wasn't it? I was just saying that the whole, just the fact of beating Arsenal, top of the Premier League, look like they're going to win the Premier League this season. So that's a pretty impressive scout. But the performance, Danny, the performance was just amazing. I can't remember Sporting really just, taking it to a top team like that, throughout the two games, really. Of course, Arsenal were on top at times, but I think this second game, in the 90 minutes, in my humble opinion, I think Sporting were the better side. And yeah, fantastic. Could have won it in 90 minutes. Of course, extra time. Rode their luck a little bit, but yeah, fully deserved. And amazing night. It really was. I was jumping up and down in my house watching that and making lots of noise. And you know what? I could hear the neighbours left, right, up, down. was pretty much the same. So yeah, a really memorable night for sporting fans and for Portuguese football, I think.
You know, something just came to me as you were talking about that, like the neighbors. So, you know, the neighbors, Benfica, you have then up north, you have Porto. Obviously, all three were in European competition. Two of the three are still are. Mm-hmm. But in a situation where, you know, we all have, you know, I'm a Benfica guy, you're a Sporting guy. There's a lot of Port fans that listen to this show as well. Obviously, they had a tough run of it with Inter, just unlucky to just break through, because we could have had three club teams still in European competition heading into the next.
And more than that, Danny, we could have had a Benfica against Porto Champions League quarterfinal. Imagine that.
Well, it's going to lead to, it kind of leads to my question a little bit, but you know, what's the response normally for you on the site when there is a success for the big three in Europe? I mean, obviously, like for me, I'd love to see these club teams go as far as they can. Allegiances be damned for the most part, obviously. But I mean, is that something that you see on your site and in your findings on Twitter and in Portugal? Is there a kind of Portugal versus everybody kind of mentality when it comes to Europe when you see kind of reaction from all sides?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dan, and I think you can make quite a clear divide. I think on the site, you know, obviously most of our, or you know, a high proportion of our visitors on the site are like second generation Portuguese, probably people like in your situation whose parents emigrated to Portugal, or in some cases it's even the next generation down. They feel a very strong affinity to Portugal and they love their football. And I think in that kind of demographic, it's almost 100%, I would say, you know, all in on Portugal. Even if you're a Benfica supporter, you'd like Sporting to do well, even Porto to do well in Europe, you know, because it kind of elevates the name of Portugal and Portuguese football, isn't it? Now, I've got to be honest, in Portugal, you know, for a lot of fans, especially the hardcore fans, of course, that is not the case. And especially when, of course, I'd say you know, really the biggest rivalry, I suppose, because of what's happened, you know, the last 2-3 decades. I have to admit it myself, it is between Benfica and Porto. You know, they've been by far the most successful Portuguese sides. And yeah, a lot of those fans, they just pray for their rival to get knocked out as soon as possible. You know, and they really can't take any joy from any success. You know, I have to, okay, that's with the ultras and with the hardcore fans. There are others, of course, who kind of, you know, see, I suppose you could say, the bigger picture, or, you know, their nationality kind of comes to the fore, and they feel, you know, kind of a sense of pride that, you know, that Portuguese sides are doing well. But no, I'd say, you know, I've got to be honest, a high proportion, especially between, like I say, Benfica and Porto fans, they really don't want, you know, their rival to do very well, especially if they're, of course, doing better than they are. If they're both in Europe, fair enough. But,
I think the Benfica Porto thing, that kind of it resonates, I think, outside of Portugal as well. I think, mostly, just because, you know, Benfica has been the juggernaut for the last 50 some odd years. Porto's had a hell of a run in the last, I would say, 15 to 20. And those clubs, Tom, don't seem to like each other very much. The fans don't seem to like each other very much. But, you know, there is a bit of a mix there between, you know, wanting to root for your rival because, you know, they represent the country. But I'm glad to see that it's very it's very cut and dry in Portugal, so it's
very feisty. Yeah, very, very feisty, no doubt about it.
Well, Tom, let's get to the national team, and we had Riddick Sarkar from Breaking the Lines on our last episode when Roberto Martinez was announced as the Seleção manager, and previously, I think it was right at the end of the year when I had it was New Year's Eve when we had you and Nathan on. We had talked about a lot of names. We had talked about kind of what we were looking for, who may or may not be there. Roberto Martinez's name never popped up. I know he was available, obviously, because his tenure with the Belgian national team had come to an end, but I was never really considering him as a serious candidate. And then when his name popped up in terms of, a few days before the official appointment where they were having talks, I'm like, okay, are they doing their due diligence? But not only did they do their due diligence, they have granted him a 4-year contract through the World Cup of 2026. So can I get your thoughts on the initial hire and kind of the reaction so far from the fans of the national team? Because it's been mixed at best.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It was a real bolt out of the blue. Like you said, nobody was really seeing this. Lots of names, of course, because there was a little bit of a gap, wasn't there, Danny's, from the time that Fernando Santos was officially let go and the new hire. I think it was a few weeks, wasn't it? Maybe even more than a month. I can't exactly remember. But there was plenty of time for lots of names to be discussed and lots of speculation, of course, lots of articles saying, Portugal should go for this man, should go for that man. And to be perfectly honest, I can't remember, hearing Roberto Martinez's name mentioned once, in those kind of discussions. Then, of course, we knew before the actual official announcement, it was kind of leaked about 4 or 5 days before that, Portugal were going to go for him. I think it's always quite interesting when that happens. I think sometimes that kind of happens accidentally on purpose, maybe by the FPF, officials in this case, or even we see it with club sides to kind of gauge the reaction a little bit. But they went ahead with that hire. Like I say, a real bolt out of the blue. And to start with, no one could really quite understand why so many top Portuguese managers, all around the world, some of them available. We've mentioned names, haven't we? André Villas-Boas, Nuno Espírito Santo, just two which spring to mind. It's a pretty open secret that they went for Jose Mourinho, but he wasn't, he didn't want to leave Roma.
Yeah, he let everybody know that too.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it's really interesting. Typical mischievous Jose Mourinho, of course, because on the official press conference, he was asked, the FBF head, Fernando Gomes, was asked if Roberto Martinez was his first choice. And he said, Martinez is the only manager that we offered an official, we officially offered a contract to. So that was kind of, trying to say yes. But then the very next day, Roma were playing, I think a Europa League tie or something, or maybe an Italian game. So it's absolutely nothing to do with the Seleção. But Mourinho took it upon himself to let the world know that, I think he said, I'd like to thank the Portuguese, the head of the Portuguese Football Federation, Fernando Gomes, for not only, making me his first choice, making me his only choice. That's what he said. So, kind of just, I suppose, contradicted what Gomes had said the previous day. But, I suppose that's all part of this process, isn't it? Fair enough. Gomes went for the Mourinho, not possible. So he went for Martinez. Yeah, and let's see. I think there's a famous Portuguese saying, which is Primeiro estranhas, depois entranhas, which is Fernando Pessoa, of course, the national poet. And he was saying, first of all, it's kind of strange. And then after a while, you kind of get used to it. And I think that's been the reaction. People were really shocked by this, but then looked at it and they said, in some ways, it kind of makes sense. I'm sure we'll come on to this, but I think the biggest criticism of Fernando Santos, fairly or not, for the last few years of his reign was that he was too conservative, too much of a defensive-minded coach. And Martinez, at least his reputation, is pretty much the opposite for that, isn't it? He's known as a very attacking coach, no doubt about it. At Belgium, they just scored goal after goal after goal. You could say, well, they've got the talent to do that, but so do Portugal.
Absolutely.
And so maybe it's not a bad hire. So, I think most people here in Portugal, most of the journalists especially, and I think most of the fans as well, they say, okay, this really wasn't what we expected, but let's give this guy a chance. Let's see what happens.
When I had Riddick Sarkar on the last episode, there's a saying here in the States, he won the press conference. I will say this. Roberto Martinez is a very charismatic man. He brings a lot of personality. He brings a lot of kind of something that has been lacking as well with Fernando Santos, where Fernando Santos is very pragmatic, very straightforward. And I'm not saying that Roberto Martinez is trying to blow smoke up anyone's you-know-what, but it did seem that it was just a different approach and kind of a breath of fresh air in terms of how to deal with the questions and with the media and everything. Again, based solely on the press conference, I like Roberto Martinez. He comes off as very, just very. He comes off very genuine. He definitely wants to get and has gotten to learn the Portuguese language fairly quickly. I mean, Spanish and Portuguese similar, but there's some things in that press conference a couple of days ago where he had where he had his call-ups where you could already tell the differences between the way he was speaking then and on his initial appointment. So I think the work ethic, is what, again, on the surface, looks like it's going to be there. But obviously, Tom, we can look at whatever, kind of rose-colored glasses we want to look through this stuff. But I'm going to bring up the group, not standings, but the teams in the group here. And give me a second. And for those of us, or for those of you, I should say, watching on YouTube, he's not going to be judged by this group because, with all respect in the world to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iceland, Luxembourg, Slovakia, and Liechtenstein, these teams should not be an issue for Portugal in terms of qualification. It's next summer in Germany when I think the real test and where we can really and fairly be able to, for the lack of a better term, criticize this hire comes into play. What say you?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be, especially considering, of course, the first two teams qualify automatically. It'd be a scandal, basically, wouldn't it, if Portugal failed to qualify from this group. And you know what, Danny, one thing you've mentioned, I think a very, perspicacious point, a very perceptive point, which you've kind of identified in that Fernando Santos reign, and not really to do with Santos, but just the way the international schedule is organized these days, that, there's no more real friendlies because of the Nations League. But if you look at this group, like you say, also with respect to those other teams, Portugal have got to be really waltzing through this group without any trouble. So what does that do? That gives Martinez the opportunity to experiment, first of all, with new names. And I suppose perhaps even more importantly, or more excitingly for Portuguese fans and Seleção fans, new systems and new tactical systems and formations. We've talked again and again, haven't we, Danny, over the years that, why didn't Santos try the three at the back system, the wing backs? You look at Portugal's fullbacks and they just look like they're, made for that kind of role. And he never tried it, not once. Martinez has tried that system, has played that system, I think, quite commonly for Belgium. I think it might have even been his go-to system there. So, that could be one thing which kind of, we look at the squad, I'm sure we'll talk about it soon. It's pretty much the same squad as the World Cup squad. But if you're implementing a completely system like that, it could kind of revolutionize, the Seleção and certainly the way they play. And of course, hopefully, which is really the end goal, isn't it, of all of these tactical systems, is just to get the very best out of the players available, which I think fair to say Santos did only sporadically, especially I'd say the second half of his tenure.
Yeah, and let's get to the press conference. Just some things that I took from the press conference from the announcement of the 26 players. A couple of notes that I wrote was. And I was actually interested to see if the topic would come up, and it was the first question, I believe. It was about Rafa. Roberto Martinez says his national team career right now, it's closed. There is no coming back for Rafa right now. So I found that interesting. I also kind of found that maybe a tad strategic, maybe. And I'm just speculating here on Hoffa's part. I think it would maybe look in bad form if he really did have any kind of interest in coming back right after Fernand Sanch was let go. Whatever the issues between him and the FPF, or whatever the issues there were between him and Fernand Sanch, I think this call-up doesn't really tell me anything about what's going to happen next summer in Germany. But what I did like was flexibility. He talked. Roberto Martinez talked about roster flexibility. You could tell that from some of the players and the number of players and the positions in which they do play. I also thought that he didn't really dodge any kind of Ronaldo questions. I know there was a couple of them. Like, is there pressure to play, pick Ronaldo? He was questioned, what does it say about a team getting ready for a tournament next summer when you're picking a 40-year-old and a 38-year-old in Pep and Ronaldo respectfully? And I thought his answer was kind of the answer that we've kind of all come to expect, is you pick the best players no matter what the age is. You ideally would love to see some sort of succession plan in place, but at the same time, if those players are still options, you pick them no matter what. So again, I thought he handled all the questions and spoke in terms of his reasoning fairly well. And I think, again, just in terms of on the surface press conference stuff, I think he's off to a really good start.
Yeah, agree with all of that, Danny. I think it's interesting you talk about his, charisma and kind of making the right impression. Going back to his very first press conference, the day he was unveiled, it was quite interesting. Right at the end of that press conference, he made a point of, going round, coming off the kind of pulpit, the stage, coming down to where all the journalists were seated. And he spoke to every single one, do you know, Danny, in there, shook their hands, and, kind of introduced himself. And so, yeah, he does seem a charismatic person. He's obviously on a bit of a charm offensive to start with.
Sure.
He wants people to, to give him his backing. But yeah, and from what you just said there as well about picking Ronaldo and Pep, I think it's quite interesting. I think, some people have complained that this squad is basically identical to the World Cup squad, isn't it? I think there's just 3 players. We'll come on to it soon, but there's just 3 players who were in the World Cup squad who are not in this squad. It's William Carvalho, Ricardo Horta, and Andre Silva. So again, none of those players being dropped is like, a huge, sensation or anything. So, in one way, I think he almost had to do this. If he made big changes to start with, you can imagine that's going to cause a bit of friction. I think a few antibodies within the squad itself. Thinking that you've just come here and you're a lot of these people, of course, it's inevitable. They know each other well. The club, I'm sure there's little groups and little cliques, and just the whole squad together. Would have. I'm not sure that they would have felt a bit uneasy, I think, if he'd made wholesale changes to start with. So I think that's fair enough. Also, going back to that very first press conference, he said his first job, the first thing he did was he rang up every single player who was in Portugal's World Cup squad to, just to introduce himself, and try and kind of break the ice, get to know them a bit like that. So I think this first round of matches is really almost just to kind of, get to know the players a bit better, face to face, obviously, get his ideas across, start, telling him what his plans, how he sees the future of the Seleção, going. And I think the subsequent call-ups are almost going to be more interesting, because I think then he'll almost have the, he'd almost have the, how do you say this in Portuguese? You say o moral. He'd almost have the kind of the backing of the players to, or you could say, it'd be justified. It'd be much more justified in making some more drastic changes, you know, or bigger changes or surprise changes. Also, of course, he's watching all the players a lot more now, so he'll actually know the players available to him. So yeah, it was no real big surprise that, you know, this is this squad. And yeah, I think I agree with you. I think so far, you know, he's handled himself well. And you know, the real test, of course, is going to start on Thursday.
Yep, absolutely. And the Seleção will be at home at the Alvalade hosting Liechtenstein. That is on Thursday, the 23rd. Yes, the 23rd.
Yeah, 23rd.
And then on the 26th, Tom, Luxembourg cannot escape us. They are somehow, some way, always on the radar. And you know, in terms of wins and losses, that's always has been a good thing for the national team. But let's take a look at the roster, and I'll bring it up here again on the screen for those of us watching on YouTube. And I don't think as you so eloquently put, I don't think the squad selection was an accident. I think it was by design. You kind of, in terms of the morale, I think any kind of huge upheaval would have been maybe looked at as like, you know, this is my team now, and you're going to do what I say. This is the way things go. I think, especially with as you mentioned as well, and we talked about this. We've talked about this in the past. Now, you know, the Nations League has, and the Portugal approach, I should say, to the Nations League has kind of made this roster very consistent. You know, winning in 2019, I think, is one of the things that has kind of driven this federation to kind of trophy hunt, because some of the other national teams don't may not take the Nations League as serious. But you know, you look at you know, goalkeeping, it's the same three from the World Cup. I'll kind of jump all over the place here, but I love the attacking wings and forwards. Those five names in Ronaldo, Jota, Gonçalo Ramos, João Felix, and Rafael Leão. You know, the midfield, you could say, given the successes in both the domestic league and in Europe, you could have seen a Florentino, you could have seen a Pot in the midfield, but it's the defense and it's the defenders that I think the focus should be on, and kind of an idea of what Roberto Martinez may run as a system, where he's called 10 defenders. And again, including Danilo Pereira, folks, he's still on that list as a defender. And there was actually a question about Danilo. You know, is he a defensive mid? Is he a center back? If you count him as a center back, I believe that would put 5 of the 10, maybe 6 of the 10. But whatever the case is, the defenders are as follows: Antonio Silva, Danilo Pereira, Diogo Leite, Gonçalo Inácio, João Cancelo, Diogo Dalot, Pep, Nuno Mendes, Rafael Guerreiro, and Ruben Dias. Love seeing Leite, love seeing Inácio. Those are the two that kind of stand out for me, basically from the entire call-up, just because, you know, we've talked about, and again, in the previous system, and again, who's to say what Roberto Martinez is going to run here, but it was Ruben Dias and Pep, and then it was Danilo, and those were your 3 main center backs. And there wasn't really a succession plan to Pep, and I think people were not so much not wanting Danilo to play center back, but just like, why is he the option when we have a plethora of possibilities at that center back position? You see Diogo Leite, you see Gonçalo Inácio, both playing very well this season domestically. How would you, I guess, where would you identify either like your surprises, your positives from this roster call-up for Roberto Martinez?
Yeah, that's probably the main point you just put there. You know, the centre backs, because of course Fernando Santos kind of famously, and he just never really looked for younger centre backs at all. You know, Antonio Silva ended up just bursting onto the scene and just was so sensational for Benfica that he actually went to the World Cup. But you know, that was a real exception, because for 8 years or so, which Fernando Santos was in charge, this was, I think, the most common criticism leveled at him in terms of his call-ups. He just really didn't give players like Inacio, I'm obviously a little bit biased for my sporting affiliation, but I think he definitely deserved to be called up, far more times. He was the Sporting centre-back when Sporting won the league, a couple of seasons ago, but didn't really get a look in. And relying on, I should say, Font and, a great player and great servant as he was, I think that really was something which Fernando Santos perhaps could have handled a bit better. And and so, like you said, it is interesting, the defenders. Danny, if we take the kind of assumption that when national teams, the managers make their call-ups, they kind of call up 2 players for each position, just to cover themselves for injuries. So Portugal, Martinez has called up 6 centre-backs and 4 full-backs, who can either play as full-backs or wing-backs. And so if, again, you go for that system, 3-4-3 or whatever you want to call it, and so you have the 3 centre-backs and you have 2 wing-backs, that's it. They've got 2 options for every one of those positions. So it does look very much like, that's certainly in his thinking. So, I think that's the biggest really take. That's my biggest take from this squad. Of course, it's going to be very interesting to see if he does do that, who will be the centre-backs. You mentioned there Gonçalo Inácio and Diogo Leite, and of course, Antonio Silva. I think, you can argue those, 2 of those, I think 2 of those 3 players will definitely be, I think, almost fixtures in this Portugal side, especially if they play 3 at the back for perhaps the next decade. Of course, you have to assume that Ruben Neves will be probably the main man. I mean, Pep, we just waxed lyrical about him, an incredible servant for Portugal, a warrior. I'm pleased he's still in the squad, even if it's just to kind of pass on, the DNA, I suppose you can say, the Portugal DNA and what it means to wear the shirt and, the kind of commitment he shows every single minute of every game. So, I'm pleased he's still there and is, of course, still performing very well for Porto. I think that's probably the biggest, the biggest talking point from this squad. New blood in the defensive side, in the defenders called up, and indications that probably is going to implement a different formation.
We're talking with Tom Kundert here on episode number 77 of the Seleção podcast. I'm your host, Danny Pinto. If you have not hit that like button on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button. Share the podcast any way you can, whether it be YouTube, send links to it from our website or from any of the podcasting platforms that you might be listening to, including Portugal.net, which we so appreciate Tom's partnership here with us as always. But the three in the back kind of leads me to a question in the middle and then obviously up front. He's playing at Fulham. No one's watching Fulham other than Portuguese fans who know that Marco Silva is doing, I think, a wonderful job there. But João Palhinha has been, and not just at Fulham, but and I kind of, before I wax poetically here, not much positivity has come from the pandemic and everything that has come along with it. But if I can just speak on the positivity in terms of scheduling a major tournament a year later, I think João Palhinha was one of the players that most benefited from the Euros being a year later than it was, because he was in such great form with Sporting, and I thought he had a wonderful tournament in 2021. And he's now taken that to the Premier League and has been playing great for Fulham. If I'm playing 3 in the back, I would love to have a central midfielder on the defensive side like him, kind of anchoring when possible. I know that Fernando Sanchez, at the end here was playing Ruben Neves. as that kind of guy, but also to distribute, because he does that so very well from the back with his crosses and his diagonals. But is this an opportunity, you think, Tom, for João Palhinha maybe to kind of stamp his place as a fixture in the middle for Roberto Martinez and the Seleção going forward?
Spot on, Danny. If it was for me, that would be one of the first names on the team sheet, without a doubt.
Not because of the shirt he used to wear, right?
No, it's not. It's just. I mean, you mentioned it there, and he has played, quite a few times now for Portugal since, that was when he broke into the side, wasn't it? Just around the Euro 2020, which was played in 2021. Yeah, and he was great, wasn't he? He was great in that tournament. I think every time he's played for Portugal, he's really stood out. He's done really well, which made it a surprise for me, not just for me, for lots of people, why he wasn't played, more often. And, at the World Cup, he hardly got a look in, did he? And yeah, you see it at Fulham. I know, you're right. Fulham, not a big fashionable team, but I think even so, I've heard quite a lot of English commentators just saying, this guy has just got to be one of the signings of the season in the Premier League. I think he's at top of all the stats for like most tackles, most, the player that has dispossessed the opposition more times. He scored some fantastic goals as well, which is kind of his added
Absolutely.
to his game.
Yeah.
For me, he's an absolute lock, especially like you said, like we've been, positing in this podcast. If he opts for the 3-4-3, of course, João Palhinha played that in that exact system for all his time at Sporting, so he'll know it very well. And so I really do feel you need a really strong, player to kind of protect the back three if the wing backs are going to bomb on forward. He just fits the bill perfectly. And then perhaps would have someone with, much more guile next to him, like a Ruben Neves, maybe, or, maybe even a João Mario. I know some people think that's going a bit backwards, putting him in the team, but you can't argue with it. This season, he has just been absolutely fantastic for Benfica. So, that's an option, but, there's no lack of options, are there, in midfield? That's possibly Portugal's, I think if you compare that to most international sides, I can really think of few international sides who have such fantastic options in midfield. So, for me, no doubt about it, Palhinha would be in that team, even regardless of the formation, even if it's just, a 4-4-2, whatever formation, I think is just the absolute top of his game. Is proved against top opposition week after week that he can be, he's an outstanding player. And also, I think there's no doubt about it, Danny, we've heard a lot of rumours already. With all due respect to Fulham, there's no way he's going to be at Fulham next season.
I don't think so.
He'll be at Manchester United or Liverpool, two who have already been linked quite heavily to him. So, great player. Should definitely be in the team.
Yeah, he played about 35 minutes in the World Cup last winter. All three group matches he played. I think it was 2 minutes, 8 minutes, and 25 minutes from what I just looked up. But then didn't make an appearance in either of the knockout games. And yeah, I think he's one of the players. And I thought, after the Euros last year, I thought that perhaps his spot was going to be kind of cemented there. So here's hoping that he can kind of continue his form from the Premier League and add it to the national team, if obviously given the opportunity. And we'll see what that may or may not look like on Thursday. The forwards, that's firepower all over. And we talked a little bit at the beginning of the podcast where one thing that you can see from Roberto Martinez managed teams are goals, and lots of them. And I don't recall which which qualifying period. I think they had some ungodly number of, I think it was like in 10 games, they scored 45 goals. They only gave up 4. It was something just ridiculous like that. And again, given the quality of the group that Portugal is in, if everything kind of goes that way, possibly because of not only the midfield, but who we may have on the wings and up front, you could hopefully see something like that. And again, that only matters if in the tournaments later on. But you have Ronaldo. I don't know what Martinez is going to do with him there. But given the possible formation of a wing back system and 3 in the back centrally, of those 5 players, Ronaldo, Gonçalo Ramos, Diogo Jota, who very happy to see back, Rafael Leão, and João Felix. Paint me a scenario, Tom. What the front 2 or 3 could look like on Thursday against Liechtenstein.
That's difficult. That's difficult. That's a tough question, Danny. Just because it's so it's so much quality, isn't it? And of course,
so let me ask you one question, listen, the Saudi Arabia is it's quite a trip from to come back to Europe, and I don't think he's getting called up if he's not going to play, and he being Ronaldo, obviously, he probably starts. If I had my druthers, if I had to guess, it would be kind of the same what we saw with the World Cup, which would be him and João Felix and Rafael Leão. I'm just guessing. But Gonçalo Ramos continues to be in form. Diogo Jota getting his form back with Liverpool. 2 great options off the bench. Again, these are games where you're not going to need, hopefully, someone to come off the bench to kind of spark the offense. But the options are there. But I'm just curious as to how he's going to implement the attack, Roberto Martinez.
Yeah, really, really curious, because of course, if let's assume 3-4-3, so basically you only got 2 midfield spots, like say Palhinha, I think he has to be a lock, and so you probably got Bruno Fernandes alongside him. So Bernardo Silva, you could actually see him in the front line, couldn't you?
Sure.
I can't really see Bernardo Silva being left on the bench.
No.
So suddenly that those 3 forward spots becomes 2 forward spots to fill. You could argue Gonçalo Ramos, absolutely tearing it up at Benfica. I'm not sure if we'd see Gonçalo Ramos and Ronaldo in the same team, because I think it'd be one or the other. They'd probably be the central focal point. And and Felix, of course, doing really well now. It's good to see him doing well at Chelsea. So I would probably, if you really pushed me, I'd say that he'd probably go for Bernardo Silva. Yeah, I think you're probably right. He'd probably pick Ronaldo and Felix as the front 3, and then or of course Ramos maybe, because I feel Ramos. What can he do? What more can he do to kind of prove that he deserves to be? Even in the World Cup, didn't he? Came in, bang, fantastic hat-trick. And he's one of these players, Ramos, I think is a really interesting player, because he's quite un-Portuguese in a way, the way he plays. Most Portuguese players, full of finesse, full of flair, full of skill, full of tricks or whatever. He is just direct, so objective. So many of his goals, it's just one touch. Really good positional play.
Does really well in the box with the ball at his feet too. One of the goals in the Champions League. I think it was the second game at the Luge. Just incredible with the ball in his feet in such tight quarters. Yeah.
And even yesterday, going to the Benfica Emirates match, he did 1 or 2 just fantastic dribbles as well, which is kind of another side to this game. But in the box, there's always 2, 3, 4 touches, 1, 2 touches. He's not Bernardo Silva. He's not a Bruno Fernandes. He's not even a João Felix. He's got all these kind of silky moves and touches to kind of completely confuse the opposition. He's just so direct. And so I think for that reason, that makes him a really useful weapon for Portugal because it's someone different. But Ronaldo is Ronaldo. It's Martinez's first selection. It'd be quite brave, wouldn't he? I think to start him on the bench. And so, if you pushed me, I think I'd go for that front three. I think we'll see Silva, Ronaldo, and Felix.
Well, Tom, I can't thank you enough for joining us here on episode number 77. A new era of Portuguese football. Obviously, we are in the beginning stages. The appointment of Roberto Martinez. He's now called up his first roster for these European matches or European qualifying matches on Thursday and on Sunday, respectively, the 23rd and the 26th of this month. I had one more note. I couldn't leave without getting your perspective, and I'm going to be just very blunt in terms of my understanding and my following of the women's national team. I don't. During the summer of during last summer they had the Euros, and I believe it was the Euros last summer. They had a tournament last and fared fairly well. But the ultimate goal for this federation on the women's side had always been to qualify for a women's World Cup, and they successfully did that via the playoff. And manager Francisco Net has the team in the World Cup for the very first time. What has that reaction been in Portugal? Because obviously, the national team on the men's side, we've had the superstar of Ronaldo. He's kind of put Portugal on the map in that sense. But I believe the women's team has gotten up to a ranking of all the way up to like 22, 23. And that project has kind of slowly picked up steam in, I would say, the last 3 or 4 years. What's that reaction been for the women's national team? And obviously, it's a positive no matter what, given how many girls and women are involved in the world of sports as well. It's just such a positive for everyone involved, really.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked me that, Danny, because it's a fantastic story, really. The Portuguese women's football in Portugal has just been steadily, like you said, I think you used a good word there, just it's kind of steadily, slowly been improving year on year on year. More investment, especially at the FPF level. To be fair, Fernando Gomes has made it a big goal of his. All codes of football. Futsal, beach football, and of course the full 11-a-side football, to really invest in women's football. And we're seeing the fruits of it, and it's great. Actually, the European Championships last year were held in England. I actually watched a lot of that because I got COVID. Would you believe it? And it's actually coincided quite nicely because I spent more or less a week bedridden, but I had the TV on, and it was the European Championships. So I've never watched. I have to be honest, like you, I can't say I'm an avid watcher of women's football, but I've never watched so much as I watched last year. And it was interesting because really impressive, the Portuguese side. And it was interesting, of course, comparing them to some of the other sides. And you could see there is work to do, obviously, I think, to get to the very elite. I think especially defensively. It's interesting also, I think Portugal suffer a little bit from just their lack of height. Remember the game against, I think it was Sweden, the final game where they just got beaten 5-0, and it was just basically Sweden were banging crosses into the box and Portugal find it really difficult to defend. But they play really nice football. That the final playoff against Senegal, is it Senegal or Cameroon? Can't quite remember.
I'll look that up.
But they played really well. It reminded me a bit, Danny, of the men's team in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. Why? Because they just played some beautiful football, completely all over the opposition, chance after chance after chance, couldn't put the ball in the net. They scored 1 goal, and then right near the end, Senegal equalised.
It was Cameroon. It was
Cameroon. Okay, apologies. Yeah. Cameroon equalised, and then at the end it was looking a bit dodgy. It's looking like they might actually miss out, but then luckily got a penalty in stoppage time, and that was that. So really, really pleased to see the women's football team really on the up and up. They've got a really tough group in the World Cup. They've got USA, who are world champions. They've got the Netherlands, who were in the last final. They're runners up. They got the last
I believe they played the Netherlands in the Euros last year too. Yeah, in a really close match as well.
Yeah, they played really well that match. Lost 3-2, and a bit unlucky. So I'm really looking forward to that. I have to say, and it's a really good, Danny, you're going to have to extend the length of each episode of the Seleção podcast, or we should definitely do some special dedicated ones when the Women's World Cup rolls around, because it's a good watch. It's good football. I think it's good quality football, and it's great all over the world, isn't it? Women's football is on the up, and it's great that Portugal are kind of caught that train. A couple of players really should be flagged up, I suppose. Jessica Silva, I suppose you could say, is the Cristiano Ronaldo of the women's team, the big star player. She's a really, really skillful player. And Kika, Francisca, I forget her surname. I think it's Costa, Francisca Costa, but she's just known as Kika. Really, really good player she is. Really skillful kind of number 10. Very perceptive, very intelligent player.
Would it be Kika Nazaret?
That's it. Okay. Yeah, Kika Nazaret, exactly. So as you see, I've still got work to do to really get completely up to speed on.
Tom, I got the roster right in front of me. This isn't coming off the top of the head. I'm just excited. There's two women with the surname Pinto on the on the team. I honestly, kind of like yourself. I'm not a follower of women's soccer very much. That's just the reality of the situation. But I, like you, I got caught up watching a little bit of the Euros last summer too. I was in the Azores at that time, so the accessibility to watching the Portugal games leading up to it, and then obviously during the tournament, I was watching that with my my in-laws in the island of Pico in the Azores. So we enjoyed it. We got behind them as well. I'm actually going to be in the Azores again during the World Cup, so I'll have a little bit of a easier times, I think, because man, these New Zealand Australia times I think are going to be a little rough for everybody. So maybe not, but obviously nothing but good vibes towards the national team heading into their World Cup in New Zealand and Australia, and any more positivity for the federation in terms of their footballing outlets and projects is always a good thing. You mentioned futsal, you mentioned Futebol da Praia, two teams that really the federation has really backed and has developed nicely into European and world champions themselves. So good time to be a footballing fan of this national team in whatever outlet you choose, right, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. You can imagine a time, like you said, I think 22, 23, they're ranked now. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? If you think about it, it's the world game, isn't it? Football, every country in the world plays it. Most countries in the world are completely crazy on it. And yet you've got this country, 10 million people, Portugal, the last, 15 years or so now, we've been in the top 10, quite often in the top 5 of ranked teams in men's game. And it would be great if the women's game, and I really do think, Danny, I tell you, I really do think the strides they're making, it's going to happen. I think Portuguese women's football, maybe give it another couple of tournaments, 2 or 3 tournaments. I think they're really going to be among the best in the world. So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Last question is, I keep getting these ideas in my head. The women's thing was something I had written down. I just had forgotten. So that's on me, but something that you were talking about just popped in. World's game, the World Cup bid 2030. Mm-hmm. Originally Spain and Portugal. Then it was reportedly they were going to include Ukraine in the bid. I believe Ukraine is now out and Morocco is in. Can you give us kind of like what the latest is and what your gut feeling may be as we sit on March the 19th? What you think the chances are of whatever bid that includes Portugal being a successful one?
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to know, isn't it, with the machinations of FIFA, isn't it?
How so, Tom? Has there been some questionable decisions made?
You could argue that it doesn't really matter what any country does or the quality of the bid, is it? Probably other factors might come into play. I must admit, I don't think it's really helpful for the Portuguese bid to kind of keep doing this chopping and changing. Even the other countries, I think it would have been better to have one defined bid right from the start. But let's see. Morocco, I suppose, if Morocco come on board, if that does become the final bid, you could argue that could, in theory, actually help the bid, because, of course, it would be including Africa, North Africa, which I don't think they've ever hosted a tournament, have they? The only African tournament was in South Africa, 2010. So I suppose that might score a few points, especially among the the voters in Africa, and there's a lot of them. And also, of course, the fact that Morocco did so well, didn't they? They did so well in the last World Cup, so that might also, sway a few people's opinion that they deserve a shot at the World Cup. But call me a cynic, Danny. I'm not quite sure. These kind of logical factors, how much they will actually, be worth when it comes to the final bid, or the final announcement. I think it might just be, the size of certain other envelopes, which decide, who wins it in the end. But,
There's a conspiracy theory from in the NBA, I would say about 30, almost 40 years ago now, where the New York Knicks had the #1 pick, or Patrick Ewing, I should say, of Georgetown, was going to be the #1 pick overall, and the NBA was going to try to do everything they could to get him in the biggest media market of New York to play with the Knicks. And the old story goes that how they used to determine the #1 pick would be just putting a hand in the jar or in the bowl and picking out the team name in an envelope and then revealing it to the media. And what the story goes is that the envelope for the Knicks was frozen and then put in so that the commissioner just like, okay. Oh, there's the cold one. All right, there we go. So
I'm shocked.
So corruption isn't just a new thing. It's been around. Allegedly, you got to say allegedly nowadays.
Yeah, that's quite a good one actually. Frozen. Yeah. You've heard, of course, in the Euro draws, lots of people suspect even that's fixed, and they talk about hot balls, don't they? Some of the balls are hotter. So that's a new one, Danny. Yeah, frozen envelope. different way of going about it.
The confirmed bid so far for 2030 is a joint bid with Portugal, Spain, and Morocco. That has been confirmed, and they're not. There's two interconfederation bids, and then one bid from South America. The bid from South America includes Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile. And then the other interconfederation bid is Egypt, Greece, and Saudi Arabia.
Right. I suppose also
something smells a little funny on that one. Yeah. That's a lot of Tom. That's a lot of travel on that one. Egypt, Greece, and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that is the South American one as well, isn't it? But it's gonna.
No one wants to host it anymore, just by itself. Germany's like we got the Euros, it's fine. But I mean, these joint again. What drives all this, Tom? It's the good old fashioned euro, the good old fashioned dollar. So we'll see what happens there. All right, sir. All the best to you. Again, a very happy Father's Day to you and to all those in Portugal as of this recording on Sunday, the 19th of March. Glad to be discussing Seleção football with you again. A new era of this national team, and we'll see what happens with these first two qualifiers. But a new start and a new day for this national team. Any final thoughts for you, sir?
Yeah, no, just great talking to you as ever, Danny. Yeah, like you said, quite exciting, isn't it? You know, we've been 8 years, haven't we, since we've had something other to talk than Fernando Santos. So,
well,
so,
no,
yeah.
Tom, Tom, you can. I mean, listen, you control your website. Will there be a tab covering Fernando Santos' reign as the Polish national team manager?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure Sean, of course, our friend Sean Gillen, covers all Portuguese players and coaches abroad. So I'm pretty sure he'll be keeping a close eye on that. So, yeah, you know, so that's it, Danny. Final of Euro 2024, Portugal against Poland. Bring it on. Yeah.
Man, oh, man. And, of course, it'll be, you know, Pep covering Lewandowski because, of course, you know, the age knows no limit for those two, for sure. Tom, all the best to you, bud, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Yeah, good stuff, Danny. Speak soon.
Okay, guys, and that will do it here for episode number 77 of the Seleção podcast. Again, our thoughts, or our thanks, I should say, to Tom Kundert of Portugal.net. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Portugal1. That's PORTUGOAL and the number 1. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you are bookmarking everything that Portugal.net is producing. And make sure you like this video, like this podcast on YouTube if you haven't already. Hit that like button. Again, if you see me playing puppets here, I don't know where the like button is. I think it's going to be here, somewhere around here. But my thanks to Tom. My thanks to all of you for listening again to episode number 77 of the Seleção podcast. Again, bookmark our website, selecaopod.com. Follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at Selecaopod. Share our Facebook page, facebook.com/selecaopod, and email the show at selecaopod@gmail.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any other podcasting platforms. Leave comments, hit the 5 stars, whatever you do that can help us get this podcast out to as many eyes and ears as possible. My name is Danny Pinto. I have been your host of episode number 77 of the Seleção podcast, a proud partner of Portugal.net. And as always, Força Portugal!